Welcome to the very first episode of Plain Air, the number one podcast about a visual medium in a completely pictureless format. We're your hosts,
Sally Deng
and
AJ Dungo. We mentioned this in the trailer, but AJ and I started this project as a way to create a stronger community amongst creatives by having conversations with artists and friends.
This week's guest is Pulitzer-prize winning cartoonist Médar de la Cruz. He literally won this prize for illustrated reporting and commentary shortly after we recorded this episode. The honor was for his work in The New Yorker called The Diary of a Rikers Island Library Worker. The Pulitzer Prize Board described the project as a visually driven story set inside Rikers Island jail using bold black and white images that humanize the prisoners and staff through their hunger for books.
We did this interview when Médar was only nominated and the results hadn't been announced yet. We didn't want to jinx it, so during the interview, we didn't mention the nomination at all.
Médar texted me a link to the ceremony out of nowhere. I was just sitting in my kitchen working, and I was freaking out when I watched on this. What do you?
No, keep going.
I know this is. Let me take that again.
No, this is cool. This is like casual. I like it.
I need to be even more casual. Let me cash it.
No.
Let me cash it up.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
But yeah, like I was in my kitchen eating lunch, and all of a sudden I got a random text from Médar, and it was a link to the ceremony for the awards. And I was watching, and it was like buffering, so I didn't realize it was live. And then it finally caught up, and then it was Médar's time. It was like his category, and he freaking won. And immediately there's like a flash flood of celebration that exploded online, starting with close friends, then acquaintances, then art directors, then publications, then our alma mater, and even Dominican news outlets. It was wild. So I woke up Sally with my insane text while she was asleep in Hong Kong, but everyone was just so hyped and proud of Médar.
I mean, luckily, I put my phone on do not disturb mode, so I didn't hear it, but I was in Hong Kong. But because of jet lag, I woke up at 6 a.m. and I just see this barrage of text from AJ, and I was just trying to process everything too. But yeah, just super, super, super happy and excited for him.
So the man of the hour, Médar, he has this infectious laugh and the biggest heart. He exudes this contagious energy that always leads to a good time when you're together. Although at the time of the recording of this interview, we were dead tired and slowly entering a food coma after spending the day together and ingesting a Cantonese feast from Sally's parents.
Yum.
Médar is currently living in Brooklyn, New York, painting, illustrating, and making comics. Médar's work ranges from deep anger at an unjust system to an untethered joy for life. We were lucky to get him into the studio.
And by studio, he means my small, stuffy bedroom that barely fit all of us.
Call it what you will. We got him in for a conversation about his journey from art school librarian to New York illustrator to part-time jail and prison library assistant for the Brooklyn Public Library. A quote from Angela Davis that Médar provided when he posted his piece in The New Yorker sums up his recent body of work as well as the themes of this episode: resilience. Quote, despite the important gains of anti-racist social movements over the last half-century, racism hides from view within institutional structures, and its more reliable refuge is the prison system. So let's get into it. This is our interview with Médar de la Cruz.
You gotta go and carry the because okay, here's one thing. I feel like I only got to know you a little bit better near the end of Art Center.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if we will have talked about that we went to Art Center together, but whatever. You and AJ have been friends way longer, and
Yeah.
I'm curious to what some of your memories are.
Médar has a great memory of our first time meeting one another.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, I remember that very specifically. I art center's orientation probably involved a tour of the library, and somebody that you were having the tour with, I think, briefly introduced themselves to me while I was shelving books working at the library. I had already been there for a year. And then within 5 minutes was like, you got to meet my friend AJ. And I was like, sure. And then we're like, I could tell immediately, like, I think I just saw your shoes and I was like, all right, yeah. This guy skates or something, you know, this guy looks cool. You know, you just had this real like excited smile on your face. I could tell that you were happy to be at Art Center and I don't know, that's happened to me quite a lot in that setting where you can sort of tell right off the bat when you meet somebody like, oh yeah, like we would get along. I don't remember exactly how we ended up you ended up asking me, but you asked me if I listened to Big L, which is a really hardcore rapper, like a really hardcore rapper. And I was like, what? And yeah, that stuck with me. You asking me like, do you like Big O? And I was like, do I?
What a weird question to ask.
There must have been something about whatever the context was that you know, maybe my headphones were already like blasting something or something. Who knows? But how that led to us skating very regularly on weekends and stuff.
Well, you lived at school, so
Yeah.
like you were just there all the time.
Yeah.
And I always had my board.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to skate.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to find other people that skated at school.
Yeah.
And you were always down.
Yeah. I always had my board on me, probably in my locker as well. You know, and I think I'm glad we're talking about that because at the end of the day, there's so many people that I could have connected with, but if it wasn't for doing an activity completely unrelated to what we were actually in school for, not completely unrelated, but very far removed from the act of sitting in a studio drawing, I don't think it would be possible for us to still be friends, like or stay as connected as we have.
I used to TA for Médar's class with Jason Hawley, and we would just leave in the middle of like, I don't know, designated work hour you would call it, or whatever it was, in class drawing, and then we'd just go skate in the back parking lot
From the South Campus.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah.
And then like we'd skate after school, and then we go. I don't know. There's just a network of all these skaters at school.
Were you guys friends before you were his TA?
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was later.
It would have been really cool if like you guys weren't that close, but then like if you were his TA and like you guys secretly just like started ditching classes, like a bad influence TA.
Yeah, I'm a terrible TA.
Jason Hawley will be like, dude, you're making one of my students fail.
Sorry, Jason, if you're listening to this.
No, if anything, it freaked me out to have my friend now be this TA because for a little bit, but it also helped me view you in a different light. Not that I needed to, but seeing the way that you gave constructive feedback and all that helped me see you help me like see what you're really like in a different light, instead of like, whoa, do it again, whatever, sick trick, wow, because it's a whole different energy that comes out when you're like skating,
That's true.
You saw AJ as a friend, and then you saw AJ the artist.
Yeah, AJ the
teacher.
The teacher, yeah.
One of my strongest memories, or like when I think about you in school, like the first one that pops up is because I think I got to know you a little bit better when I worked in the library.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it was like right before lunch, and you had just finished a shift, and you had your skateboard. I'm like,
I know exactly where you're gonna say.
Well, I'm like, where are you going, Médar? Like, and you're like, I'm gonna go, blah, blah, I'm gonna take the shuttle or something. And I'm like, oh, cool, have a good one. And then I'm starting my shift, and I remember like a few hours later, I see him come back in. I'm like, oh, Médar, like, what's going on? Like, what happened? And then like he walks closer. I see his forearm just completely scraped. I'm like, what just happened? What happened?
I still have the scar.
And he just very casually just going, I fell or something like that. It was something like, you just said it so nonchalantly, and I'm like, Dude, do you need to like get a doctor or like,
It
what's
was
going
really
on?
bad. Yeah, it was actually really bad. I was bombing the art center hill,
Oh
and
my
I
god.
and I and I fell all the way at the bottom of the hill.
Oh
But
my
it was
gosh.
so bad. Like I still have that scar. It's a scar right here on my hand.
Uh-huh.
It was so bad that I just needed to go back to that first aid kit because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna go back home right now. Like my hand was swelling up. Um, yeah, it was really bad. That was one of a few falls that I took. But that was when I was starting to feel like confident, like, oh, I can go down this hill on my board or whatever. But yeah, I remember that memory. I remember I went straight to the back of the library to that really great first aid kit and emptied it out really quickly.
Can you tell us about your relationship to the library at school and what that's meant to you today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the library was my first job at school. I had a few, I was a TA, I was like a tour guide. What's interesting about the library, even when I think about it more, is that when I grew up, I didn't really have a library that close to me. So I wasn't, you know, I wasn't that close to, I didn't visit libraries that much. And what I always reflect on now is that, the library, at Art Center, even if it did at the time, I didn't know where it was or see it very much. It didn't have a fiction section, but it did have comics, and comics had their that was my version of the fiction section because I could read a comic that was telling me a fictional story. Other than that, the library is filled with books on design, architecture, film. But anyway, I got that job at the library, and it was my first job. I had like little things as a teenager, but this is my first job, as in that I held on to for the entirety of like the time that I was a student, which was 5 years. You asked that question in relation to where I am now. I guess it's important to say, like, by the time I graduated, that was the one thing on my resume, the one singular, all the other things were the one thing that I felt like, because of how long I worked there, that I felt like it looked kind of cool. Like this from 2011 to 2016, I was just like in the library. So when I was looking for work, like a job, not for work in illustration,
This is
um,
after graduation.
after graduation, it was like even before graduation, I had actually done like a workshop at the Pasadena Public Library. And there was even an internship sort of thing going on that with Art Center, that a few students participated in, where we worked with the Pasadena Public Library to design one of their zines and do some sort of posters in the old Pasadena branch. So I just started to realize, like, okay, like, this is like a path, or like, I don't know, like a space that I'm gravitating towards without really thinking about it much. At Art Center, there was a couch in front of the library that I slept at. Like, it was just like, I don't know. It was like my safe place.
You're talking about the couch that everyone sleeps on, right?
Yeah, but I took over that one for
Yes.
a while. That was like that was my bed for a long time. And yeah, when I was looking for a job, when I moved to New York and I was looking for a job, it just made sense to apply for a job at the library. I had that experience, the experience of, I don't know, shelving books, understanding the Dewey Decimal System, and just, I wanted to be surrounded by books. I grew up with a dad who had an entire wall of books. And to this day, he's moving from his house right now, and like all of the furniture he's selling, but the wall of books he's like moving with. Like, that's like, so I grew up, the smell of books, the touch and feel of them. Like, I've always felt like comfortable and safe around them, and without them, I start to feel a little bit like, all right, when am I going to be around them again? Or I need to just, I gravitate towards them. I associated books as being like this very positive thing in my life, specifically illustrated books, as a kid. So when I started getting into middle school and high school, the illustrations on the books started to disappear, and I stopped reading.
Oh.
I started getting into comics. I would collect them, and I wouldn't really read them because I didn't really have access to what I would later realize I needed, which was stories that are maybe more relatable. I didn't really care so much for um, fictional stories as much, or stories that seems way too far from reality. Maybe they like I started getting into fictional stories that still seemed rooted in reality to a certain degree later on in college.
I actually don't know this part of the story of your story that well, in how you not only just started working for the Brooklyn Library, but like took the part in the current like
Position that
position you're in.
Sure.
Or like I have an idea, but
okay. I mean, I told this story earlier today when I was speaking to the students at Otis. So I'm a little bit like I remember when I was speaking to them about it. I was like kind of hesitating, and I don't know. I worked at my first library job outside of Art Center was the New York Public Library as a what is the information assistant position, which is really you just do a little bit of everything. And a lot of people who work at libraries do a little bit of everything, like in a branch. And especially, they were some of these people that work there were very quick to let me know, I'm not a librarian, because a librarian is something that you need a degree for, which is you go to library school, it's a master's program.
They would tell you that?
Yeah, it's passive aggressive, but I started embracing it. I'm like, you know what? I'm not a librarian, so I don't, whenever there was something that was beyond my scope, and just like, go speak to the librarian. I'm just like the part-time employee here. From there, I ended up working, through skateboarding again, like I met a few other skateboarders that a lot of them worked in marketing and stuff like that. And I just skated with them so regularly in Florida. In New York, that my friend ended up just telling me about this position. He knew that I was familiar with Adobe programs, and he was like, listen, if you can use Adobe programs, you can work in this like corporate office, in this marketing office. And before I knew it, I ended up picking up this marketing job full time that paid pretty well. And it was right before the pandemic started, and I basically worked there for about a year and a half. I was pretty miserable because of the fact that it is 40 hours of my day, 40 hours of my week. I was making a lot of money. I was very happy, and I was moving forward in my like personal life. But I would try to draw in the office, and like, I don't know, it was just like, I ended up like working from home when the quarantine started, and I ended up being let go, which was like, that was for the best. So I ended up being unemployed and doing some freelance stuff here and there that would come my way, and selling some work that, commissions and whatever, that I would work on at home, and just living off unemployment checks. I was applying for jobs the whole time. I applied to every single other corporate office that I could. I didn't get any of those jobs. And I think it's important to mention that. Like, I applied to a lot of jobs. I didn't send out any emails to art directors or any of that. But I was applying to jobs because in my head, I still needed something steady. And then I see this position. Then, before when I started running out of ideas, I was like, okay, I guess it's time to try to work at a library again. I have more professional experience in that. And so I started looking at library jobs again, and specifically this time in Brooklyn, because I was living in Brooklyn now. And I see that there's this library position called Jail and Prison Outreach Assistant. And I'm like, And to backtrack a little bit, which is, I think, a story that I still kind of like talk about, maybe more so these days with less shame and embarrassment than I would earlier. But even though it was very short-lived, I had experience being in jail, twice in New York already. And at this point, I had already been living in New York for 6 years. So, and during my first 2 years of living in New York, I had already been in jail at least once overnight because of graffiti. And that was really like it was an interesting experience. It was miserable, but it was interesting from the perspective of like, I was very sad and miserable that I was in there, but I was also viewing it as if it was like just something that I was like, okay, here I am, like this is what this looks like, and just like kind of taking it all in. It happened again a couple years later while I worked at the library. And so when I see this position, I thought to myself, well, I'm not, maybe I can use my experience to get this job, maybe I can mention indirectly, I did, that I'm familiar with this space to a certain degree. And I did when I applied in my cover letter.
Did you ever think it would like deter you?
What?
Or I mean, not deter you, but like, lessen your chances of getting the job?
No, well, that was the interesting thing. Because this is the thing another interesting thing that happened was the first time that made me think about this is that the first time I got arrested, I was paired with like a district attorney whose job was to make a case for me to be released right away. And I did. I was released within like 19, 20 hours or something. And a few months down the line, I got an email from her. I don't know how we got each other's information like that, or like how she got my email or what. But I got an email from her, and she actually had sent me a position that she thought I qualified for, which was teaching troubled kids, if that, for lack of a better word, art. Like it was like a nonprofit organization that worked with kids who are otherwise like dealing with getting in trouble and using art to deter them from going down the wrong path. And I remember at the time, I don't know, I don't even know if I applied for that job, and I don't know why or what happened, but I remember I got very emotional when I saw that position that she had sent me, because it just I don't know, I think I got very emotional because I realized like that something that I had felt so much shame over actually was something that had a lot of value.
It sounds like then it gave you the confidence and give you a little push to actually like put yourself out there.
Yeah, be honest.
And for that job specifically.
Yeah. I basically said, in the cover letter, I was basically as honest as I've ever been. I was like, at this point, because I had sent so many job offers where I was trying to be so professional and I wasn't getting into these jobs, So I wrote this cover letter that was like personal. And it did feel personal because at the end of the day, I saw when I spent my couple nights in jail, I saw a lot of people that looked like me, and that looked like my family members, and looked like a lot of my friends, and who were as young as me, younger, and then what I also saw and witnessed was what I would consider an extremely disrespectful way of treating human beings, regardless of why. It just felt like something that I felt like I had to say or do something about. And I know already from my experience from working at the library that the people like the Brooklyn Public Library, even though it's also funded by the state, is not the position of the library, and the position of providing somebody a book is doing the opposite of oppressing that individual at the end of the day. So when I see this opportunity to go and provide books to individuals who are incarcerated, I know that it's not necessarily taking them out of their situation, but it is freeing them to a certain degree. And I wrote this cover letter like frantically. I really wanted it. And when I got my interview, I really wanted it. And I got it.
Yes.
So here I am 2 years later.
Well, we can, I don't know if you want to talk too much about the job itself.
I can, yeah, sure.
Or you can just go ahead and talk about the New Yorker comic.
Okay, sure. You want me to like talk about more how it started, or?
Well, it seems like the feelings that you're experiencing. Let me put it this way: like you experienced what the people that you're gonna visit and deliver books to had experienced. At what point did you feel like, you sort of talked today at the Otis talk, which I was at, about your why and why you do things and why you make art in a certain way. And I remember you in school, and you've always had a strong voice that's sort of leaning towards, activism and having being an advocate for people that are unknown and unseen. At what point did you feel like I I need to take what I'm experiencing and turn it into something, and then did something come of that?
When I was unemployed for that time before I got this job, there was a huge push that has unfortunately since, in my opinion, died down for people of color to be represented, specifically black and brown people to be hired to, like, all of a sudden there was a push like, oh, okay, we need to get all these black and brown artists to be represented here and do this and that. So it was something that I was doing before, like when I was a student, like you said, because I went to a school where there was not many people who looked like me. And then George Floyd was murdered by the police, and then everybody reacted, also considering what was happening at the same time, which is the quarantine, the pandemic, and everything. The world is in this place. Donald Trump being the president, all of these things, like politically, the world was like doing something that like I was instinctively reacting to, right? So it's like an instinct. And I used to, before that, I would draw and paint things that I think were more tailored towards like design and less towards like a message. Or I tried as a student, but for as far as my professional career, I had trouble putting those two things together. But then the world, I felt like the the design world and the world of illustration, the world of people, I feel like all of a sudden had wanted to hear black and brown stories more so than ever. And I was like, I have one. It's not just me. I guess my answer to that question is not like I had this idea that I wanted to do this. I feel like people around me all of a sudden wanted to hear my story more. And something that I didn't mention at the end of the day before any of this is, while I was working at the library, I started to, before everything, more so I think as a reaction to the Donald Trump presidency, perhaps also as a reaction to the fact that I'm from Florida. And even before, when I was at Art Center and I was embraced by other black and brown students, I started to have like an awakening myself about who I am and what I look like, because of the fact that that wasn't a conversation that I had growing up very much. At the end of the day, I grew up. I'm Dominican, and I think it's important for me to say that I'm Dominican, and there's a lot of there's a lot of identity politics within my culture that make it very complicated to talk about being black, specifically for me, for my experience, because that's not the same for everybody, but that was my experience. So and that's kind of the beauty, I think, of illustration, is you're showing something, you're not necessarily explaining it. So it felt really easy for me to use visual art to just represent something rather than explain why. So I was making a lot of work before, like during 2016 and 2017, that was just about race, and like it was like these one panel comics that were about me processing the what I interpreted as the black experience. And fast forward to today, or to 2 years ago, now all of a sudden I have an opportunity to not talk about it in such an abstract way, and now it's more of like a anecdotal.
You mentioned those comics. As I remember seeing you posting those pieces online, they were all like, when I look back at those drawings, it wasn't just like the idea was abstract. The way you rendered, the way you drew people, and the way you told the story wasn't super straightforward. Thinking back about the New Yorker comic and some of your more recent stuff, is there a preference for you? Like how you're expressing these stories, how you're relating these stories? Do you find yourself just naturally shifting gear, or do you find yourself that you're naturally wanting to be more straightforward now to tell these stories?
I feel more comfortable in my own skin these days. So I
Mhm.
think that's I feel more comfortable being honest and being personal. A lot of the approach that I was using was an extension of my, my limitations. I was using these very minimal, like this very minimal visual language, because that was what came naturally to me. And over time, I started developing what I would now describe as a more complex, or I don't even know if complex is the right word, but based on reality, based on true to the human form, the way I
Mhm.
draw now. It's not so much like I'm shifting gears, because I was always trying and wanting to practice representative drawing,
Mhm.
representational drawing. I'm sorry, but at the time, my message of you know what was more important, and now the message is not so much a single message as it is like an opportunity to give other people a look into my experiences, and then I guess I can let other people decide what the message is if they're interpreted however they want. But when I'm using this very minimal approach, I'm not really giving you much space for interpretation. I'm saying this is my opinion and this is what I want you to think. And whereas now it's like, this is what I want you to see, but what you think and what you want to feel about it is up to you.
It's awesome, man. I remember seeing those comics when you were having this awakening, and to see where you've come is pretty amazing because they were heavily satirical and really biting and angry, and like you're really getting out this righteous anger about the state of the world as you saw it, and that's carrying on to this like the work you're doing now. It's just awesome to see the growth, man. Like I don't think one is better than the other. I just think it's been consistently like honed in, getting better and better. Like we keep referencing the New Yorker
Okay.
project
Yeah.
and like the Rikers Public Memory Project. Could you tell us about like how you fell into those projects and how being involved with the library falls into that? Like how does it all connect?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the experience of getting this job and actually entering Rikers Island for the first time was very abrupt. I got the job, I'm hired, and my first day on the job, I'm in Rikers Island, which is notorious, a very notorious place. Before I ever went there, I had already had all these ideas in my head. There's movies about it, there's songs, and there's news articles that come out every day. So I'm like going in there like almost terrified. But my coworker is this very relaxed person, and he's been doing the job for years, and it's like just another day I work for him, and it's just me and him walking into this space. And as soon as I walk in there, I just had this instinct immediately of feeling like I needed to show the world what this place looks like. Because I feel like at the end of the day, it's con- regardless of the fact that there's thousands of people incarcerated there, and twice as many people who work there. It's not something that there is enough there, you can't really see it as much. Like there's a documentary about it on HBO that was filmed in the 90s. So there's no like there's not enough out there that I know of that will tell you about it today and where you can see it. So as soon as I started working there, I felt the instinct of needing to draw my experiences, and I started drawing while I was there. There's a lot of downtime there, a lot of waiting around, because the job involves essentially rolling around a book cart into a housing area. Like I basically these big bars get opened. I walk in, the big bars close behind me. I get surrounded by a bunch of men, and they start just looking through books. So I'm just standing there waiting for them to pick whatever book they want. And then they tell me what book they check out. I write it down. I ask, hey, is there any books that you would like for me to get for you next week? And then I move on to the next housing area. So there's a lot of standing around. And then during that time, like I would on the way to work, and like I always have since I was a kid, I do a lot of drawing, a lot of doodling, and a lot of sketching. And all of our electronics are taken from us when we go in. So it's not like I can take a picture and there's no other way of recording the place. There's no other way of drawing becomes the only way. And even that I feel like I have to do secretly in case a correction officer decides that they don't think that I should be doing it, which has never happened. But I essentially put some of these sketches or one of these sketches online a few months into working the job as a way of updating my friends and family, saying, hey, look, this is my job. Here's a drawing that I did about my job. And I also mentioned in the caption that I've been, writing in my journal. And that's it. I just felt, I didn't know what else. I was just like, I have these drawings and they're out here and I want you all to see it, And I was reached out by the New Yorker, specifically by Aviva Mikhailov, who believed in me and, immediately reached out to me within days of me putting that online. And over the course of the next 7 months, I worked with her to develop this article that has, I think, a total of 14 drawings and writing. And it's basically a day in the life of me going to work while also showing, what I would consider some of the most impactful experiences that I had up to that point. Because I essentially started that article within 5 months of working the job. And by the time the article was published, I had just hit 1 year of working the job. And you also mentioned the Rikers Public Memory Project. That is another opportunity that led me to drawing portraits for formerly incarcerated people who had been on Rikers Island. And that's a job that I worked for 6 months with the Rikers Public Memory Project, in which they interviewed, I think, over 140 people at this point, but paired me with 6 individuals from those interviews whom I got to speak, got to meet, create portraits of to go with their interviews that are available online.
They're amazing projects, man. And I'm curious, something like this, both these projects seem like really daunting tasks to tackle, but I wonder how the limitations affect the execution of the project, like having the filter of art directors. You had mentioned fact checkers. You had mentioned juggling the expectations of the library you work for and also the corrections officers, and even talking about the public memory project where you're dealing with real people's stories. Like what was that like?
It was very eye-opening and very interesting because as soon as I started the article, I had to get the thumbs up from the library. And that involved telling my boss, hey, listen, I got this extremely amazing opportunity. Is it okay if I just start doing this? And then he had to reach out to, I think I had a meeting within the next day with like 6 of like the executive people in the library, like the people whose job it is to work with anything that has to do with the library, for anything that gets published about the library. And they gave me the thumbs up right away. But my boss was actually, he was kind of worried that it would put our small team in jeopardy and maybe we wouldn't be allowed back into Rikers Island. So that was just the beginning. Like right away, I knew that I was like kind of like walking on thin ice, And a lot of it for me was a little bit, it gave me a lot of anxiety because all of a sudden, even my coworkers are looking at me like, okay, now this guy is like, everything that he's seeing, everything that I say. I started getting anxious about how my own coworkers would look at me, because I'm a journalist now. All of a sudden, I went from being a guy who draws comics when I get home from work to like a journalist. Um, and to this day, I still have like a bit of I'm like, am I still a journalist? Like I consider myself a comics journalist now. But there is an awkward thing about that. It's awkward. And at the end of the day, when I was working with New Yorker, by the time that it came down to the wire, and it's almost time when all my work had been done, all of my drawings had been done, the fact checkers had to speak to all of my coworkers to fact check all of the information that I was about to publish, and also speak to all of the connections that I had at Rikers Island. We're talking about like the person in charge with programs who is employed by the Department of Corrections. It gave me a lot of anxiety, but somehow, I mean, not somehow, through a more objective perspective, the article was published. Like, I definitely had to edit out what I would, describe as some subjective, I mean, to be frank, obvious things that still needed to be represented in such a way that wouldn't jeopardize the Brooklyn Public Library or the programs department of the Department of Correction. So that essentially, you know, pushes me to today to still feel the desire to continue trying to explain what I would consider is my more subjective experience, which is what I'm still doing. I'm not sure if that answers the question. It's kind of
Yeah.
okay. Very
It's
lots
a
of
lot.
jargon.
It's a lot.
Lots of jargon there.
Well, I mean, it's not easy.
No.
I know you have your own criticisms for it, and you're never going to be 100% happy. But despite all that, the piece is incredibly powerful. I think you did a really great job in showcasing not just the situation, but also like there's a certain tenderness to it that's only from you, because you being you are such a caring and like empathetic person. There's a certain, you can feel that the narrator of, which is you, of the comic cares about the people. It's not just all like complete sadness and bleakness, but you highlight each individual. The individuals. It brings that extra level that is uniquely yours, and I think, I don't know, makes the piece that much more special, I think.
And it's even more meaningful for people who know you, because when that came out, we know how hard you've been working in New York and how you've been grinding, and this was like the culmination of everything you stand for and represent in like a perfect storm. And to see you get this break, man, it was so sick. But I mean, obviously it's heavy subject matter. But
just to see it pop up on Instagram, because I had no idea, and I saw it on Instagram when you post about it. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, when you're talking about you're mentioning the image that you posted, just updating us because you've been kind of radio silent on Instagram or whatever, and then like just this flood of success that followed. Like it's emblematic of the person that you are, and the sort of, like Sally said, just compassionate, kind-hearted person that you are. That it like the project met the perfect person for it, So it's been awesome to see, and like I don't know, I don't want to do such a violent shift here in gears, but I do, something about this podcast that Sally and I really wanted to get into is the things that you're into outside of work. Like what else are things that like you find energizing? I mean, obviously I know the answer to this. Sally knows the answer to this.
Yeah.
The three of us do something very fun together.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd love to know the other things that energize you outside of, these heavy topics you're dealing with. Like what balances you out? Like what are the things that inform your artistic practice in your personal life?
Yeah, I mean, the what you're talking about is surfing these days, which, you know, I give you credit for, you know, pushing me literally onto my first wave.
Same
um,
here. AJ started it all.
yeah, which is, you know, I remember in New York, the first time that I pushed myself onto my own wave, or one of the first times, there was like an old guy there with like a big white beard. I forget his name, but he could tell that I think he could tell that it was like my first time doing that, and I was on my stomach the whole ride. He was like super hyped for me. He's like, I remember that, man, and it's been 40 years, and like forget about it, you know, like what you just did there to yourself, like, yeah, it's on now, man.
Dude, did I ever tell you about the traffic control guys? And what, like, you know, when it's really busy, there's always like,
Yeah.
this was back when I was, and we can edit this out, but this was back when I was living in an apartment in Chinatown, and I was still surfing more with AJ just to save time in the morning, because I had to street park like 2 blocks away from like my apartment. But then, like, if I was surfing like the next day, I didn't want to be carrying so much crap to walk, you know, at like 5:30 a.m. So the night of, I would bring the surfboard and put it in my car, which, thinking back on it now, wasn't the smartest, because, you know, someone could be like watching and want to break in, but whatever. I happened to be carrying my board to my car like 2 blocks down, and there was a Dodgers game because I live near Dodger Stadium, so it was lots of traffic, and there was the one traffic guy in the middle of the road. He was like directing traffic. He sees me carrying the board. He stops doing whatever he's doing, and he starts chatting with me. He's like, "So you're a surfer?" And he was like asking me about like my first wave and something, and I was saying like, "Oh, I'm not that good yet, blah blah blah." He's like, it's similar to what your old guy with the beard was saying. He's like, "It's okay, you know, once you catch that wave, like that feeling, blah blah blah." And I'm just like, "Oh, you know, I don't want to be holding up traffic," which I kind of am right now. But like, the guy didn't give a shit.
Yeah. No,
They're
no.
just magical old encouraging men.
Yeah.
They're just waiting their whole life to tell us that we're doing a good thing starting this year.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I caught the bug with that one, especially when I realized that it's something that is available to me in New York, because I couldn't fathom that. And I know plenty of people who have lived there their whole lives who I tell them that I surf, and they're like, "Where?" And I'm like, "Right here," you know? So that, skateboarding, and what else?
You do a lot of actual plein air.
Plein air painting.
I see you do a lot of plein air. When I was looking over, you know, your progression, like your art on your website, on your Instagram, and I know we were talking about really heavy topics just now, but through everything, even the one panel comics back then, to your plein air paintings, to current editorial things, and I was talking to AJ about this. Like, the one thing I noticed throughout is that you can very clearly, at least to me, see like the joy and the love for your subject matter. And I feel like that, I mean, when I told AJ this, he was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense." Like, because we're like, Médar's like one of the most joyful person we know. And that's not to say that you're always like the happy-go-lucky kid. But there is, despite, and especially knowing, like, you know, how hard you worked and all the obstacles you've had to overcome, there is like this bright light that, you know,
Eternal optimism.
yeah. And that's not, I don't want to put a pressure on you saying like you're always a happy person, because no one's always happy.
I'm glad, you know. All those things at the end of the day, like, because we were just talking about surfing, skateboarding, plein air. These are all things and activities that, from my experience, for the most part, revolve other people. You know, like, so I'm just feeding off the hype. You know, like when I'm surfing, like in that experience, like somebody cheering me on, Same with skateboarding and even in plein air, especially in a big city like New York. I sit down and like within 10, 15 minutes, I haven't even really put much of a mark on the paper, you know, and people are like, nice. People are just happy. Like people are hyped. People are hyped. And I remember even at Art Center for a plein air project, I was sitting like on like Lake Avenue by myself on a corner, and some guy was like, "Wow!" and like, and I wasn't even doing anything. He like threw me money, and I was like, "I don't, you know, I'm just doing a homework assignment right now." But the hype that people give me, I feed off of, you know, and if you were to meet some of my family, you would see where it comes from, you know. Like I come from a family that dances a lot, you know, like. I can't dance very well, but my family can dance, you know, and like my family can have a good time. So I was raised with a lot of laughter, through a lot of tough times, but a lot of laughter. That's the only way I know how to express myself. I sometimes I envy people who are more composed, or so to speak, because you know, once I get going, like I laugh very loud. I used to get in trouble a lot as a kid, like so to be when I draw, it's like my opportunity to like compose myself. Like okay, I gotta sit down and like compose myself, but maybe it still comes out of me when I draw and when I paint. I always gravitate towards brighter colors. You know, I'm lucky to be surrounded by folks who are very encouraging and also extremely. I would say the same about you, both of you. You know, I would say exactly how the way you just described me about the both of you. You know. So I just happen to be surrounded by people who I feed off of. That I am reflecting that optimism. Yeah, I'm reflecting it off of the people around me.
Dang, good answer.
I know it's tough though,
Yeah.
because I have some experience with like, not a whole comic, but like just certain illustrations or assignments that deal with heavier topics. And it can really like get into your head, and you're trying to balance showing the reality of the situation, but also, not making it completely just doom and gloom. Because otherwise, how I approach it is if it's all doom and gloom, then how is that going to help the stories you're telling, the people whose stories you're trying to tell? Or do you have a different way of
I
approaching
mean, there's so many things happening in the world today that are so doom and gloom. And at the end of the day, like when I think about it, especially when I really try to like compile it all in my head at once, like what's happening across the entire globe at the same time, one of the first instinctual reactions that I get is actually like resilience rather than overwhelming or like being overwhelmed by anxiety or about it all. I become in awe of the resilience that people have. That is something that I am amazed by. The people that inspire me the most have so much resilience. Culture is born. Laughter is still possible somehow in the worst of situations. Some of the funniest situations happen in the worst situations. It's almost like laughter. If I really start to like analyze it, and I'm sure there is some sort of scientific analysis about like what laughter is. It's like just a cackling sound that comes almost as a reaction of like what I interpret as almost like confusion. It's like irony triggers laughter. Like it's like the two. It's like a climax of like the two opposite things. Like oh my god, this is so funny, regardless of how like wrong it is to be laughing at this moment or something like that. Like those are the moments that are funniest, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because I see that a lot in some of your older pieces when you were still figuring out, a little bit angry, a little bit confused in your first few years in New York. And like the pieces you post kind of like encapsulates that, where you're in a dark spot, but you have like, it's infused with like dark humor.
Yeah.
And you're kind of just laughing because like, what else can
What
you
else
do?
can you do? Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I think I've always loved about comics and why I feel like some of these comics that I read as a kid were so impactful to me because like they're talking about subjects that are really actually pretty sad if you think about it. It's like Calvin and Hobbes is like this kid who had no friends and his only friend was like a toy that would spark his imagination. If you really think about it, it's pretty dark, but it's hilarious and it's absurd. That makes the most sense to me. And I grew up in a family that has a very dark and sarcastic sense of humor too. So it's how I understand the world. It's how I've always understood the world. Like, it's the movies that I watch and the music that I listen to.
Big L.
Yeah, Big L was very dark. I wasn't poor, I was po. I couldn't afford the OR. Like, what? Like, he was so, like, there's so much humor and darkness. People are resilient. People who can find that are resilient. And that's where I find inspiration for real. Like, in Rikers, some of the funniest people I've ever met are in Rikers Island, and it's like their resilience that, and I don't really like to lean too much towards that when I talk about people at Rikers Island or when I talk about other people. It's easier when I talk about myself, because I don't want to romanticize too much, but it's still a reflection of the human experience to understand that all humans react in their own way to a difficult situation, and it's common to react in a way that leans towards joy or humor as a form of like survival almost.
Nice.
Sorry.
No.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, this is.
I mean, I'm not trying to wrap it up. But
No.
A reflection mid conversation. Like, this is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah, same here.
I just wanted to point that out because I think it is a very rare thing to make empathetic art, to be able to bring a bit of hope, a little bit of joy in that darkness. I think it requires a special touch or a sensitive someone to do it. I know that when I look at your art, I know that the person behind it is someone who cares deeply. And just the fact that there is someone who cares that deeply making that art already like fills me like with a little bit more optimism and a little bit more hope for, not just the art world, but people in general.
Same.
Not to pile too much, I don't even know the word. What's the opposite of criticism?
Being very effusive with our feelings.
Or
Showering him with compliments.
compliments, that's the word. So this is how bad it is. Like I'm so much more comfortable with criticisms and critiques. I've temporarily forgot the word compliments.
It's cool. It's funny because these are the types of conversations that we have all the time, at the end of the day. And I think, like, keep each other going that way. We keep each other inspired by letting each other know these things. Your use of color inspires me.
This is the Médar de la Cruz episode.
Yep.
It's true though. I feel like it's
End of interview.
to contextualize. I'm just contextualizing this connection, this interaction we're having. Like I am drawn to being around the both of you for the way that you two express yourselves too, and because of how serious you take your art form and your technique and everything that you do. And it would be impossible for me to do what I do without the people around me who, regardless of letting me know that anything positive they have to say to me are letting me know how they feel about what they're doing by doing what they're doing, So these interactions where we're together are, really mean a lot to me,
It's one big love fest. Want to do a fun question?
Sure, throw some at me.
A fun series of closing questions.
Yes, that AJ came up with. Just to,
No, this is a committee, the two of us.
Oh, do we? Oh, okay, my bad. I mean, we don't have to ask all this.
I think you answered the first question, though.
Okay.
Oh, do you?
Let me hear it.
This is what's great because the first question is, do you think we're cool?
Do I think you're cool? I think you are fascinating.
That's not cool. That's not cool.
You're very cool.
Okay.
I think y'all are like some of the coolest people I know. What are you
All
talking
right.
All right, cool it.
about?
You go ahead, Adrian. Got air.
I know. We're going to have to cut that air.
It's okay.
We're learning how to read right now.
I have
Okay.
a 14-hour flight. I can edit.
All right. How about, this is kind of a silly one, but if you had one life sponsor, like one sponsor to rule them all, like someone that would just, or something, some entity that would power Médar de la Cruz.
My grandma.
That's the best answer.
My grandma. Mama.
That's the only answer.
Yeah. That's a real Médar
so
answer.
sweet.
I mean, if I'm supposed to choose somebody, if I had to choose somebody that everybody knows,
No, that was the right
Right.
answer.
No, that was you're good.
I wouldn't know how.
I mean, for the listeners who don't know, like, she's a superhero and she was in your stories and she made me smile all the time.
One more? Why not? One more. I feel like this question is apt. Bring it back to the beginning, but who would compose the soundtrack to your work, your life? What would it be?
If I had to choose one, compose. You know, the other day was Sarah Vaughan's birthday. This is a singer who sings a lot of classic like jazz music, or sung a lot of classic jazz music, and because of it was her birthday, it was her 100th birthday, her centennial. They played her music for 48 hours on the radio, and I heard such a variety of emotions in her music that I felt like I connected so deeply to. So right now, I have Sarah Vaughan in my mind, and Sarah Vaughan would be pretty cool to pick. So if you don't listen to Sarah Vaughan, you should go check it out. Favorite song is Black Coffee.
Nice.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe Celia Cruz. Celia Cruz is another one. I think that's a more real to my upbringing. Celia Cruz.
Yeah, man. We haven't even touched on music. That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
Like, you're an encyclopedia with music.
It'll be another hour talk.
Yeah. Wait, I want to ask this one. Mm-hmm. Who's an artist that makes you want to go outside, and who's an artist that makes you want to go inside?
I think
These are thinkers.
There's
no time limit.
It's funny because the art that I grew up that inspired me a lot, that I never even got to speak about at all, is I can't think of a specific artist. But I grew up going to the Dominican Republic as a child and seeing these amazing costumes that are called Diablo Cajuelos. And there's these like crazy elaborate costumes that are designed essentially for the joy of children. And I started finding a lot of these online that essentially show the process. And those are artists that make me want to go outside, and I don't even know a lot of their names. This is folk art. Like, folk artists make me want to go outside, and I see it everywhere. I'm like, when I'm outside, I see this everywhere. But the art that makes me want to go inside right now are like the Hernandez brothers. They make me want to go inside because I want to go inside to sit for an hour with their books. I am obsessed with the Hernandez brothers right now, specifically Gilberto Hernandez.
Nice.
Extremely obsessed right now. That's where I'm at right now.
Those are good answers. One more, or are we good? Médar, you want one more? Or you want to
throw me another one? The last one. Three for good luck.
All right, you pick, Sally.
Oof.
I just want to know what type of questions y'all have back there. Don't think about it. Just pick one.
You've answered these great.
Yeah.
We'll fine tune this in future episodes, but
Yeah.
All right.
This is pretty good so far.
Any plans you've been putting off because of like all this hustle and just work in general? Because I feel like that we talk about that a lot too. Everyone, at least in our inner circle, is kind of burning out right now.
Yeah. I'm supposed to get my license. I got my license expired. Yeah, I had a license and I let it expire. Don't let your license expire ever. Oh my goodness. Like as soon as I get my life together real quick, I'm gonna get a license and I'm gonna rent a car or something and I'm gonna like go explore upstate New York because I don't know much about upstate New York. Yeah. I'm just drive a car. Like that's a good feeling and put some music on in the car.
We're afraid that answer is going to be too practical, and then you injected some fun into it.
Well, it leads to the joy and the vacation.
Yeah, I like to explore. I want to explore. I've been definitely putting off getting my driver's license back. I got it when I was 16 and I blew it. I let it expire. Don't do that. Yeah, it's terrible.
There's some good practical advice.
There it is.
For all those young illustrators out there.
We just want to thank you for being our first guest.
Please, thank you.
Médar,
That was great. That was
guest.
fun. That was fun. I'm I'm gonna have a hard time listening to it later, but whenever I do, I had a great time recording it. So, thank you.
Let's go start.
Everyone can find your Instagram, website.
Yeah, my website's under construction. My Instagram is. It's available, but it's not. Don't go to it. My Instagram is MDL Comics, MDLCOMICS Comics. Shoot me a DM. Follow me. Follow my friends, and turn on the radio.
Nice, perfect. Let's go start.
Round of applause.
We did it.
Yay! Awesome.
All right, do the 3, 2, 1. I need it every time.
3, 2.
And there you have it, everyone. Médar de la Cruz.
Okay, this is our first episode, and I'd just like to point out the obvious, and that's that neither AJ nor I are audio people. We had a tremendous amount of help from friends and family. The PA boys, Fernie, Keith, John, and then there's also Jackie, Vincent, and Mo, to name a few. We know there's a lot of room for improvement, and we're already learning from our mistakes.
Things like don't have your host share a mic.
Don't record a podcast after a giant-ass meal.
Don't forget important recording equipment at the last minute.
And I think there was don't record in a room that shares a wall with a kitchen, etc., etc. There's a lot more. But we're having a lot of fun figuring this all out, and I hope you guys will continue on this journey with us. So until next time.
Bye.
Bye. So stupid. Are we good?
Perfect. Keep in the stupid. I think that's great.
Okay, slow clap. Stop recording.